Hello there. Now that we're into the second week of the War Within pre-patch, the big event was the launch of the pre-patch event Radiant Echoes. And this was certainly enough to get the community talking about it a lot. The new event Radiant Echoes is a rotating world event that has many similarities to some of the Dragonflight world events. As with most pre-patch events of the past, the rewards focus heavily in catch-up gear, with the event dropping soulbound champion pieces and regular warbound until equipped items for alls. An event currency in a vendor also allows for some deterministic gearing. Finally, there's also a new heirloom ring that can be made by collecting some materials. Upon launch, this event generated a lot of negative feedback from the community, with the primary complaints being the event's 90-minute schedule, its very short duration, overly low drops of the new currency, and severe lag. Lag is certainly another major tradition with these pre-patch events, as a combination of server populations being bolstered by returning players, folks getting bored with other content, and the event's design tends to lead to players becoming very concentrated into single areas, with the usual result that we're all used to in MMOs. That is some fairly hefty server lag. While we are used to lag in these type of events, my own day one experience was that the lag was a lot more severe than normal, making the event honestly a major challenge to even be able to engage with at all. In fact, it was probably some of the worst lag I've ever experienced in World of Warcraft that wasn't also accompanied by a server crash. In day 2, the experience did feel a lot better, and Blizzard had clearly been doing some adjustments, most likely to their sharding rules, and that did leave the event mostly lag-free. That was until we fought Onyxia as the final boss, and she spawned her whelps. Let's just say her servers really didn't like that. A far more urgent part of feedback though was the event schedule and the rewards pacing. At launch, the event had a 90-minute rotation, with the boss only spawning once, which due to the very high populations meant that the event was usually over in 5 to 10 minutes. The original final phase was a bit of a long tail mob grind with fairly sparse drops of the event currency. This sparseness was made worse by relatively high prices on the vendor, meaning that maxing out everything would be a very difficult thing to achieve, even with close to 24/7 farming. Blizzard did, however, very quickly respond to this feedback, with major changes being announced on Thursday. The event now rotates every 60 minutes, and the boss will spawn multiple times throughout that hour. The weekly per character quest was also converted to daily per account quest, with currency drops getting hefty buffs. These changes have certainly significantly improved the event in my opinion, the main benefit being the transformation from a scheduled event to something that's a lot more turn up and go. One of the things that I personally disliked about the Dragonflight World events was their schedules, which prevents one from just logging in and playing at the time of our choosing. Most of the events also tend to punish lateness, so you'd end up having to wait around for them to start. Unfortunately, despite these changes, lag when the main boss spawns is still a bit of an issue, at least during the more busy times of day. While it has improved from day one, it's still often very difficult to get abilities off during the fight, and I personally have experienced cases where the boss loot hasn't dropped. Hopefully this is still in Blizzard's radar and that they'll continue to make adjustments. I do think that this event always did have the potential to be a bit of a step up from the Shadowlands and Dragonflight ones, and it's good to see Blizzard being able to respond to feedback with such commendable agility. While changes to rewards pacing and a speed up of the schedule was something I had expected, being able to make such more significant changes in a matter of days is unusual but also very welcome. I do think that this event always did have the potential to be a bit of a step up from the Shadowlands and Dragonflight ones, and it's good to see Blizzard being able to respond to feedback with such commendable agility. While changes to rewards pacing and a speed up of the schedule was something that I had expected, seeing them being able to make much more significant changes in a matter of days is very unusual but also very welcome. That all said, it's very strange to me that the event managed to be launched in the way that it did. Some of these issues were raised during the pre-patch testing, and it's disappointing to see Blizzard wait for it to go live before they would take action on them. I do hope that in the aftermath of this, the team will take some time out to try to understand why they seemingly missed by so far. I'm also hoping that the feedback around the schedule will encourage Blizzard to reassess their approach to scheduling world events more broadly. While these events have been a bit of a mixed bag in Dragonflight gameplay wise, the issue of not being able to just turn up and play them when I want has also served to make them a lot less enjoyable for me overall. The new event wasn't the only bit of content we got this week. On logging in, we also got a brand new cinematic that was a little bit different from the ones that we've become used to. Instead of a standard video game trailer or a major lore moment, what we got was a mini 3-minute long recap of the main story points from the end of Legion. As a player who is heavily invested in lore, I didn't get a huge amount from this, but I nevertheless really like this approach, as it's a great opportunity to help catch up those players who aren't so invested and frame things in a way that hopefully should help to make the new expansion storyline make a lot more sense for them. It also, as always, offered some beautiful imagery, including excerpts from recent cinematics along with new footage, and its execution was typically flawless. So overall, this does get a really big thumbs up from me. Staying on the new content front, and I also noticed a possible tantalizing little hint that there may still be some more content to come during the pre-patch. On the quest login game, there's a new entry for the War Within, which includes mention of the first chapter of the campaign, but without giving that chapter a name. As the War Within story on beta has a lot more than one chapter, this does make me wonder if we're going to get the intro chapter, which hasn't been seen on the beta during the pre-patch cycle. Back in Dragonflight, we did get the intro quest line that took place in Stormwind before the expansion launched, setting us up to go right over to the Dragon Isles at launch. While that quest was a bit of a blink and you'll miss it deal, I liked that approach a lot. And as the entry here is described as a full chapter, this suggests that it could have a little bit more meat to it this time around. When or if that will show up, your guess is as good as mine. Most likely either next week or the one after, and I'm certainly keeping my fingers crossed that that's going to happen. One less positive example of Blizzard moving fast came with the tuning of drops from old instances. With the launch of the pre-patch, buffing the item levels of old content gear for leveling came an increase in the vendor values. This quickly caught the eye of the raw gold farmers, with an uptick in interest in running older content. Unfortunately, this has now been followed by a hotfix nerf to those gold values. My own personal view was that the reported gold values were probably too high to sustain, but I do think that the scale of the nerfs that have been reported have been a bit heavy-handed. Back in Legion and BFA, running something like Dragon Soul could net between 2 to 2,500 gold, but with the Shadowlands level squish, this was crushed down to 2 to 300. World of Warcraft has a massive back catalogue of old content that's just sitting there crying out to be made relevant. We do of course have mounts and transmog, but once you have them, there's really little reason to go back. When I started farming mounts in BFA, I could not complete my list of old instances in a single night. Today, thanks to a lot of luck, I can now complete what's left of my list in a bit of an hour. And honestly, I miss having that stuff to do. World of Warcraft, like most MMOs, struggles with the rate that casual open world content is consumed. And it just seems to me that more use of old content, as the success of Remix or the reuse of old dungeons in Mythic Plus has shown, could be a much cheaper way to keep us all busy during downtimes. Raw Cold is interesting enough to players to add repeatability to old content. Sure, the reported amounts that were dropping were too much, but taking it back to BFA levels, which didn't cause the sky to fall in back at the time, just feels like an easy win to me. Moving on to new content, and with the start of a new month comes a new trading post, and this time we get 2 new mounts. If you're an Alliance player wishing for an armoured wolf, or a Horde player looking for an armoured saber cat mount, then the new trading post is for you. The Sentinel War Saver and the Corcoran Warwolf are 2 new cross-faction theme mounts, and these can be ridden by either faction. They cost 600 tendies each, so if you want both of them, I do hope you've been saving some of those up. One aspect of the trading post that has been getting a lot of feedback was the monthly reward, which this time around was a cool target-shaped back piece. The trading post seems to be moving away from using mounts and full ensembles as the monthly reward like we used to get in the past, and this has been generating a little bit of disappointment from the community. I'm not entirely sure to what extent this is just the novelty of the trading post wearing off a bit, but I personally don't feel the same anticipation that I used to in the past, so I completely get this feedback. It may well be coming up time for Blizzard to think about putting something a bit more eye-catching in to give it a bit of a shot in the arm. This week's reset also brought with it the final enablement of the Warbank, or Warbank as I think we're all going to end up calling it. This for me was the most interesting part of the overall Warband feature, being able to more freely transfer items and especially go between my alts is a major draw. I haven't really started to use it in anger yet, but it does seem to have a very strange limitation. When I try to put items which have a refund value into it, such as the new Warbound Mythic Plus gear cache, it won't let me do it. The odd thing is that these items can be sent via mail, albeit with a warning that the refund status will be removed. Personally, I'd have preferred for the bank to also work in the same way, that is by removing that refund status, rather than having to hang on to an item for a couple of hours, which honestly is a bit annoying. I do wonder if this was one of the issues that was preventing the bank opening last week, and hopefully it is something that is on the developer's radar and that they can address, as it really does limit the bank's utility, at least for me. Anyways, enough of the pre-patch. Even though the War Within is getting ever closer, Blizzard still had the time to push out another beta build. As has become the norm, this was dominated by class tuning, but it was also accompanied by a major encounter tuning pass. This was heavily focused on giving hefty nerfs to incoming tank damage, and is most likely one of the missing parts of the overall retuning of tank survivabilities. On the beta, tanks had been feeling a bit like Blizzard had overshot and dialing down their survivability, and these changes could hopefully go a long way to addressing that. Mythic Plus fans also got to take a look at another new affix. With this new affix, we're now up to 4 in total, and I suspect this is likely to be Blizzard's intention, at least for Season 1. The new affix is called Devour and it spawns a rift. This rift applies a 53% health absorb onto players. This absorb can be dispelled by any dispel or it can be healed through. Doing this awards a stacking buff offering 2% health and 4% crit to the entire group. With all 5 players dispelled, that means 10% health and 20% crit. After 50 seconds, any remaining absorbs will then heal enemies for 10%, which is slightly punishing potentially, especially if you miss them all. This affix does seem to follow the overall trend of offering a much more positive approach to affixes than we have seen in the past. Anyone with a self-dispel will be able to deal with it quite easily, and 15 seconds should be enough for the healer or indeed any other player to dispel anyone else in the group who isn't able to dispel themselves. More broadly, I still do have some significant concerns about the Ascendant affix, which is the one that spawns 10 orbs that we have to deal with. But the other 3 affixes all seem to be a lot better for me. This affix does seem to follow the overall trend of offering a bit more of a positive approach to affixes than we've seen in the past. Anyone with a self-dispel should be able to deal with this very easily, and 15 seconds should be enough time for the healer or indeed any other player to dispel the people in the group who don't have self-dispels. More broadly, I do still have some significant concerns about the Ascendant affix, which is the one that spawns the 10 orbs we have to deal with, but the other 3 affixes all seem to be a lot better. What this means for me is that probably the affixes will feel quite unbalanced with an almost anti-push week 1 out of 4. I also do still have some concerns about the +7 affix, which increases the death penalty from dying from 5 seconds to 15, which I personally think will likely increase toxic behaviours like quitting still viable keys. It's always very hard to know how things will pan out until we get to experience the season for real, but I do think that the new affixes, despite my concerns, will be an overall improvement. One remaining worry for me is the increase in the number of upgrade steps in the myth track gears. Unless we see some increases in crest drops or perhaps a reduction in the penalty for depleting a key, Mythic Plus only players are going to be asked to do a lot more keys, and that increased grind could lead to burnout. But what about all of you? Are you looking forward to the new season, or is there something that you're just not so keen on? Let me know in the comments down below. One last discovery from the new beta build is that it's been flagged as a release candidate. As a general rule, Blizzard flags PTR and beta builds as release candidates a couple of weeks before they release them, and this probably means that we can expect the 11.02 patch to drop either on the 13th or 20th of August. This patch will likely contain the main expansion content, and so pretty much has to come out before the early access starts on the 22nd. This also means that the team will likely be going in to at least a partial change freeze, so this may well have been the last beta build and major update we'll see, unless there are some major issues. This doesn't mean that there will be no changes. It's quite common for release candidates to get regular hotfixes similar to the live game, and there certainly will be scope for some more class and encounter tuning in the run up to Season 1 starting. But the chances, I think, of any more major surprises is probably becoming quite low now. Anyways, that's all for this week. If you want to support my channel, then by far the best way to do that is to hit that subscribe button, and do make sure to also hit the bell icon so that you get notified when I release my videos. And if you have enjoyed this one, be sure to hit the like icon to let both me and the algorithm know. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.